Good morning, dear students. Welcome to another English lesson. Today we're going to continue with the Cambridge Checkpoint book. Grab your books and let's begin. Most of today's lesson is going to be solving exercises. So first, we're going to solve some exercises on your course book. After that, we're going to explain poetic form. Then we will know how to create mood and atmosphere. And finally, we will solve the exercises of your workbook. Yesterday, we've read a poem, Presents from My Aunt in Pakistan, and we solved many exercises about that poem. That's the last exercise related to this poem that we're going to solve right now. So, this exercise is on page 122 and it contains A, B, and C. For A, infer how the persona, and if you're wondering who's the persona, it is the person, the character in the poem. So, the speaker here. Infer how the persona feels about having left Pakistan and about life in England. Well, you can make any conclusion through that, so answers could be different. This is an example answer. He feels lonely and excluded in both countries and unable to live up to the expectations of either, or to the present sent by her aunt, which seemed too exotic and out of place in England. As for B, infer how the mother feels about the sisters she left behind in Pakistan and about her daughter. So we would say here that the mother cherished her Indian jewelry and was presumably devastated when it was stolen, as it was her link with her past, and she's probably distressed that her daughter does not seem to value the presents sent by her aunt, but prefers to wear English clothes. That's another poem that could be found on page 122 and 123 in your book. So if you want to read it first, then we will have to answer some questions about it. So you can stop the video, have a look on this one, and we will solve the exercise after that. In this exercise, we will try to find some things that were said, some specific things required by the book, as we have in A, B, and C. So the first one, A, what is the persona saying about her grandmother's life? We would see anything that the character was saying, and we will try to put it as a conversation, like as between speech marks. So we can use this. The persona uses these words to describe her grandmother's life. The shop kept her no need of love. People used like the antique objects, too frail to keep a shop. The smell of absences, no finger marks were there. As for B, what is the persona saying about herself? The persona uses these words to describe herself. I was afraid. I still could feel the guilt of that refusal. And finally, I felt no grief at all. These were all things that the persona were saying about herself, the character about herself. And for C, what is the persona saying about the relationship between herself and her grandmother? We can say the relationship was a cold and distant one because the grandmother seemed to care about objects than people, and yet was hurt when her granddaughter refused her, so that her granddaughter felt guilt after her death. Now we would explain poetic form. and I would explain this subject briefly because I put a link for another video that explains poetic form, and there is a practical work there. So you may have a look on the other video. Now, what is poetic form? It is mainly rhyme, rhythm, stanza, and lines. So what is rhyme? As you know, the ending of lines whether they're rhyming or not, with the same ending or not. So we have the rhyme scheme, which is AB, ABC, whatever the rhyme scheme is. As for the rhythm, it is the beat of any poem. For stanza, it is the verse. If you have, for example, 4 lines and then other 4 lines alone, each one of them is a different stanza, different verse. And finally, lines. And this is a very obvious one. Lines are the lines that we know. In poetry, the form and layout of any poem should match the subject and the feeling of the poem. So, if you're talking about, let's say, a sad poem, the shape, or let's say the layout and form of your poem would also be sad. So, here we have some examples. When you have long lines or run-on lines, and you may not know the meaning of run-on lines is when you have one line that doesn't give full meaning. So the poet goes to another line to continue it. So this is run-on lines. This represents what? Something that takes a long time, something that you've been struggling with, for example, for a long time. It cannot be contained. While short and stopped lines suggest something completed, something that finished, and maybe the effect of it is still in your heart. For exercise 14, you are not required to know about the rhythm because you haven't studied it yet. But the answer for A would be, think about the rhythm of the poem. The rhythm is slow because there are a lot of polysyllabic words and long vowel sounds. This adds to the unemotional tone suited to the muted relationship being described. This is something that I wouldn't expect you to answer because you haven't studied rhythm in a detailed way. However, for B, this question is about the rhyme scheme, which you are very familiar with. So, is there a regular rhyme scheme or any rhyme at all? Are the lines end stopped or run on? As we said, end stopped finish with full stop, or the idea, let's say the idea is completed even if you don't use a full stop. While run on is when the idea is still not completed. You need to go to the other line to finish it. So, what would you answer? You can stop the video, have a look again on your poem, and answer. The answer would be there is a regular rhyme scheme of A B A B C C. You see the first one, her goes with furniture, glass goes with brass, and finally the CC is prove and love. C. Tone is the emotion you put into your voice to read a passage or poem. What kind of emotion do you think would be appropriate for this poem? We would say that the dispassionate tone emphasizes the lack of feeling between the two characters and the enormous distance between them. Here we would learn how to create mood and atmosphere in poetry. So you should know that the mood can be cheerful or subdued. In simple words, it means it can be happy or sad, gloomy. So many things determine that. Like what? The setting. If you're talking about things that happened at night, for example, in a rainy day, you would usually think of things as being sad. The rhythm also can help creating this cheerful or subdued mood in your writing or in your poetry. Vocabulary, the type of vocabulary that you use, if you use some happy, nice words, of course it would be a cheerful mood. And finally, even the punctuation, as we explained, when we said if you're using run on lines, this would definitely give other types for cheerful or subdued moods. Now we would move on to our workbook and try to solve the important exercises together. First exercise, exercise 1. We already explained the rule of I before E except after C. So you will try to put IE or EI in the following words that are given. So the first one is receive. You see here the EI. Why? Because it's after C. Neighbor is an exception, as you know. You have protein again. Weird, sees. All these words are EI. Some of them are just irregular or exceptions, and some of them after C. While here in the other column you have thief, as you see, the regular one, I before E. Then achieve, the same way. Perceive, here you have C, so you have EI. Relief and chief. For exercise 2, we have to put the right punctuation marks by the end of each sentence. So for A, you have this one. Will you please come here quickly? So you're asking, the answer could be yes or no. That's why it's interrogative sentence with a question mark. And then they did exactly the opposite. So the speaker is clearly not satisfied. He's showing feelings here. So we have exclamatory or exclamation mark. I am not here to discuss the accident is just a statement, so full stop. Tell me all about yourself. That's order. And you know, with imperative sentences, we use full stops. And so on with all these examples or all these sentences. For exercise 4, we have to put the hyphens in the right places. Remember that we use hyphens between some words that make up one word, like adjectives. For example, well known. Here we have an A, long haired. This long haired is an adjective, so we put this hyphen between the two words. For the same sentence, 16-year-old. All this 16-year-old boy, 16-year-old is modifying this boy, so it's one adjective. That's why we put all these hyphens between the words. Your attitude may be grown up, but it is rather old-fashioned, another adjective that needs a hyphen, and so on with all these sentences. For exercise 5, it is the use of dashes. So remember, we add dashes when we have afterthought, when you're speaking about something, and then like you add something to continue it. So you can copy the answers given here. This exercise is probably the most important exercise here. So what is it about? It's about conditional sentences. So whenever you have these conditional sentences, it is better to go and review the pictures that you had about having zero conditional, first conditional, second, and third conditional. It will be better to refresh your mind and know what tenses to use in each one of them. So for the first one, if I were you, I would not go. This is the third case, which is the second conditional. Yes? You use would plus the verb go. So I wouldn't go. As for B, water boils. Here's a simple tense and it's a fact. So you say water boils if it is heated. Simple, simple. So this is zero conditional. C, I would have come home to your party if I had received the invitation in time. So this is the third conditional, the fourth case. Yes, that's an imaginary one. As for D, you can say, unless we hear from you by tomorrow, we shall have to cancel the booking. And it goes in the same way with all of these sentences. So study them in the best way possible. That was all for today's lesson. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section. And don't forget to put your names to know that you're watching these videos. I hope you enjoy your weekend and see you next week.